Then later, we're going to be talking to one of the great coming men of American media. His name is Cenk Uygur. He's the host of the biggest online news show in the world called The Young Turks, and he's the guest host on MSNBC. And with him, I'll be taking the temperature stateside on the fall of Mubarak and what it means for American foreign policy. The Young Turks YouTube channel has had over 23 million views a month, and that's theyoungturks.com, which is a very, very interesting outfit, I must tell you.
You should see the joy on people's faces and how everyone is singing and clapping and cheering. So it's really great. It's unbelievable.
That was Ahmed Salah, one of the founders of the 6th of April movement, one of the organizations responsible for starting the great Egyptian revolution. And my next and final guest, Cenk Uygur, is the host of the biggest online news show in the world, which is no small thing. His show is The Young Turks, and he personifies that title. He's one of the coming men in American media, and we're privileged, I think, to hear from him this evening. Good afternoon, good evening, my friend. Cenk, are you there?
I am indeed, George. It's a great pleasure being on here with you.
Thank you, my friend. Now, my dear, the earth is shaking as a result of the overthrow of the Egyptian dictator. And also the walls of the White House were reverberating with some wonderful oratory from Barack Obama earlier this evening. But for those of us who follow these events closely, our overwhelming feeling was that it's a bit late, President Obama.
Well, first let me say that the protesters came to Mubarak and said, we don't come as the accused, we come as the accuser, to borrow a line from a great man.
Indeed. A very great Scotsman.
Indeed. All right, on Obama. If you ask me, yes, he was late. They were calculating. Tonight I had as our guest Nicholas Kristof from the New York Times. He thought that they were late, and he made a really good point. I'm sorry, Mike Vicara, the NBC White House correspondent, actually made the great point. He said, if the protesters had gone home 3 days ago, would President Obama have come out so strongly last night and then today? And the answer has to be no, he wouldn't have. He would have just left it at, yeah, we're kind of with the Egyptian people and we're kind of with the Egyptian government.
That's right. Now, I mean, there was a bizarre situation where the president appointed an envoy, Mr. Wisner, to go to Cairo, appeared not to know that Mr. Wisner was actually working for a law firm which was in the pay of the Mubarak dictatorship. And then we had that envoy declare that President Mubarak was a great public servant who should be allowed to complete his term all the way to September. Hello? We've lost our young friend. What a pity. We'll try and get him back. Here's my guest in the United States again. It's Cenk Uygur, who was just about to answer my point about Frank Wisner. Did you hear the point I was making about Wisner's extraordinary endorsement of Mubarak? The President of the United States cannot have wanted him to do that.
No, and look, this is the problem that is endemic to America. Everyone is a lobbyist, and they're all over the government, and they're former government workers, and they're diplomats, and they're colonels, and they're generals. And, our government is for hire. And so that was a terrible misstep by Wisner, but it should have been expected, given that he gets paid by the Egyptian government, at least indirectly.
Indirectly. Yeah.
But if you want to talk about lobbyists that are influencing Washington, you want to talk about Saudi Arabia. They control so many of the people that are former government officials and think tank people, etc. And their dictatorship goes completely unchallenged because of their lobbying power.
Not to mention Israeli lobbying power, which is even more powerful.
And on it goes. And in domestic issues, when it comes to health care, the health care insurance people control it. When it comes to the banks control it. there is something fundamentally wrong with the American system of government as it currently stands. It can be made much better. I believe in change. I just wish we got more of it.
Yeah. Now, Cenk, look, I'm a supporter of Obama, at least against the likely opponents. So what I'm concerned about is that all of this over the last 18 days, and indeed Tunisia before it, have rather underscored, underpinned, buttressed the Republican attack on Obama that he's a ditherer.
Right. Well, look, here's the thing, right? He is, let's acknowledge he is in a tough spot, because if in the beginning he comes out the minute there's a protest and says, all right, I'm throwing Mubarak under the bus, I don't like that guy anymore, and I'm with the protesters. Well, then we have all of our allies in the region who are almost all also dictators, who then grow significantly wary and concerned about U.S. support. Now, as friends and supporters of democracy from the outside, we might be happy about that, but obviously we have a lot of interests there that have to be protected. As the president, I understand he has to balance that out. And I will say that I think that at the end he did do the right thing, and that results matter, right? And there are many presidents who would not have gotten to that point, and his being forceful last night seemed to have had a big effect. Having said that, he went and gave a speech at Cairo talking about the freedom that he believes everyone should have, especially in the Middle East. And when push came to shove, I wish he'd have gotten there a little quicker so that we could live by our principles and what we have espoused for so long here in America a little better when it comes to Egypt, and certainly as these events unfold when it comes to all of those governments in the Middle East.
Well, absolutely correct. And the point I'd make, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, is that it's a much better way of defending one's interests to approach these dictatorships from the standpoint that we want to see them transformed, not that we want to see them maintained because we have interests there and because they serve our overarching support for Israel, for example, in relation to the Palestinian people, or because they give us oil and gas for a cheap price so that the United States, with 3% of the world's population, can consume 25% of the world's energy. These are not legitimate and ultimately not successful ways of defending one's interest.
I agree. Again, I understand the need to balance our short-term interests with our long-term interests. But there are times when our long-term interests and ideals seem to get lost in what is our supposed short-term interests. And I think that we should live by our creed, and we should believe in the ideas that we espouse. For example, I believe that if we have democracy and freedom in that region, that in the long term and in the midterm and probably in the short term, that we would be better off, that we would be better served, and our security interests would be better served.
Quite so. Now,
you know what? Let me give you one last example on that. Look at Turkey, right? So Turkey in its democracy from time to time disagrees with the United States, and we get annoyed by that. We are aggrieved by that. For example, they didn't agree to the invasion of Iraq. Of course, they were entirely right, and we should have listened to them instead of ignoring them. And they didn't let our troops go through Turkey into Iraq. Now, short term, you might say, oh, well, that's a democracy that didn't work out for me. But in the long term, Turkey is one of the greatest allies of the United States of America. See, that's long-term, smart, strategic thinking.
well, I was making the point earlier that the likely outcome of free elections in Egypt is a government just like Erdogan's government in Turkey, which is Islamic in character, modern in outlook, and moderate in disposition. Why can't we do business with governments like that?
Well, we can, and Turkey is now either 15th or 17th largest economy in the world. It's the envy of many of the developing countries.
Its growth,
they have found the right balance.
Its growth
now,
matched the growth of China this year.
Yes, which is amazing. It's stunning. So now, that's the end goal. We want to get there. Now, why is Egypt similar to Turkey? I think you bring up a great point. Because one, Egypt has this young, secular youth movement that we saw that led this revolution. 60% of the people in Egypt are under the age of 30. Think about that for a second. That is enormous. And those young kids grew up on Facebook. They grew up on the Internet. They did not grow up on Sharia law or Al-Qaeda or any of that. This was a direct on the idea of Al-Qaeda, where they said, we will not do this through violence, we will do it through nonviolence. And that is exactly what we want to encourage. That could lead to the same kind of secular government we have in Turkey. And furthermore, the military here did not side with the dictator, largely speaking. I know there was a lot of nuance there. And in the past, Turkey has had a military that stood up for democracy. So I think you're on the right track, George.
Now tell us, how do people listen to your online news show, which is the biggest in the world?
They can go directly to our website at theyoungturks.com. Also, we have a large YouTube channel. We're the largest news channel, of course, on YouTube as well, and that's youtube.com/theyoungturks.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Cenk Uygur, the biggest online news show host in the world. I would like to be able to say that myself one day.